What do you see as the future for the euro? Do you think it will survive? Do you think it will reduce down to some core countries? Or do you think that it will likely collapse?
Yeah, I was against the UK joining the euro, and indeed one of the great things that Gordon Brown did when he was Chancellor was to actually make sure that through those 5 economic tests the UK did not join the euro. Now, some people in the campaign argued that they were against the euro but they were in favour of the EU, and this strengthened their argument. But I always found it quite contradictory, because the euro is central to the whole EU, and the euro is a fundamentally unstable currency system. And if you argued against the against the euro, against Britain joining the euro, then the fundamental reason for not joining the euro was still, in my mind, a fundamental reason to be wary of remaining in the EU. And in recent years, both the French and the Germans have stressed that the survival of the euro is key to the project. Now, unfortunately, one size does not fit all. The Greek economy, the Spanish economy, the Irish economy, amongst others, are not like the German economy. The Germans and the Dutch, amongst others, are not spending in terms of their surpluses to help the rest of the euro. And it's an unstable system. And therefore, I think the euro itself has to either collapse, or more likely what will happen is that we will see this becoming the stepping stone to a United States of Europe. The only way the euro as a currency system can survive is if it becomes a political union, and within that there's going to be constraints on fiscal policy in the peripheral economies, maybe some give on policy within Germany. It's important to stress that in the negotiation the UK had with the EU in the year ahead of the referendum, the key area for the government was to get a veto for the non-euro countries over the euro countries. We failed to get that veto, which meant that if we were to have remained in the EU, we would have been very much driven along by the EU's necessity of having to become a political union, and any areas of disagreement we had with the euro countries would have to be decided by the European Court of Justice, further undermining our sovereignty as well.
Okay. Just very quickly on that point, you're right, the other option is political union. But do you think that's going to be politically viable?
In terms of the EU, I think it's important to stress that if we look at the 28 countries that are in the EU, including the UK at the moment, I would argue that the other 27 largely view the EU through a political lens. It's only in the UK that we tended to look at this primarily through an economic and financial lens. And when you look at the pain that the Greeks, for instance, have gone through, and they decided not to leave the euro because the Germans threatened them that if they did, they would be kicked out of the EU. That highlighted to me that despite 4 or 5 years of depression, the politics won out. So for the other 27 EU countries, I think that they will be increasingly pulled into a closer political union. So the politics at the moment suggest that that's the stepping stone that the EU is going down in order to keep itself together.
Banking fragility is again making headlines, particularly in Italy. Is another round of crash and bailout on the cards in Europe?
Unfortunately, that might be the right way to ask the question. In fact, since the referendum, I think we've seen a succession of crises within the EU and Eurozone, and we will see more. In recent weeks, it's the Greek debt crisis has come more to the fore, the Italian banking crisis, which was not helped last December by decisions made in Brussels. We now see greater awareness of the pending life insurance crisis in Germany. We already have the high youth unemployment crisis across the whole of the EU and Euro area. In fact, I'm still staggered in the UK that so many Labour voters were so enthusiastic about a system that fails to deliver. The EU and the Euro is a big banks, big company system. It doesn't produce the demand that is necessary across Western Europe. It results in high rates of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. All of these are problems that are still there and will again come to the fore. I think the euro itself really needs to be a two-tier euro if it has to, on economic grounds, change. But as I stressed in the earlier answer, the more likely scenario is that the politics will dictate, and the politics is always the answer, or more Europe is always the answer to any impending problem on the continent.